Good afternoon, everyone. Today I will be presenting on the Manchester Arena bombing, a tragic event that occurred in 2017. This event is a significant example of how religious arguments can be twisted to justify acts of violence. My goal is to explore the motivations behind the attack, its connection to religious violence, and the broader implications for understanding and preventing similar tragedies. Today we will be going over a brief introduction of the event, who was involved, how I learned about the event, background and key themes, similarities and differences to other instances of religious violence, and finally, an outlook for the future. On May 22, 2017, Salman Abedi carried out a suicide bombing during an Ariana Grande concert in Manchester, England. This horrific attack killed 22 people, including children, and injured hundreds more. It sent shockwaves around the world because of its deliberate targeting of young concert goers. The attack is a great reminder of how religious arguments can be manipulated to incite violence and how extremism continues to threaten public spaces. I first became aware of the Manchester Arena bombing through global media coverage shortly after it happened. The widespread reporting focused on the devastating loss of young lives and the shock to the community. In the past few weeks, I began diving deeper into the event and started researching about radicalization, particularly how extremist groups use propaganda to exploit personal and political grievances for their agenda. Salman Abedi, the perpetrator, was a 22-year-old British citizen of Libyan descent. He grew up in Manchester but became increasingly influenced by extremist ideologies, particularly ISIS propaganda. His actions were framed as a form of retaliation for Western military interventions in Muslim-majority countries. The bombing was not just an act of violence, but a symbolic attack on Western culture, targeting a public venue with significant emotional resonance for young people. To dive a little deeper into the motivations and context of this attack, the Manchester Arena bombing was a calculated act of terrorism driven by personal and ideological motivations. Salman Abedi was heavily influenced by his family ties to extremist networks in Libya, which shaped his worldview and exposed him to radical ideologies. He sought revenge for Western military actions in the Middle East, framing the attack as retaliation for perceived aggression against Islam. The choice of target, being a concert attended by young fans, was deliberate, aiming to maximize fear and provoke global outrage. This symbolic targeting of Western entertainment highlights the broader cultural conflict extremists aim to exploit. However, what makes this attack even more tragic is that MI5 had prior intelligence about Abedi's potential threat. Despite receiving reports and red flags about his activities and connections, these warnings were not acted upon. This oversight allowed Abedi to construct a homemade explosive device using locally purchased materials and execute the attack without detection. There are a few key themes that emerge from this attack, first being absolute truth. Abedi and ISIS believed that they had the sole interpretation of Islam, justifying violence as a religious obligation. Second, sacred text, the misuse of Islamic teachings, particularly jihadists, to frame acts of violence as divinely sanctioned. And lastly, defensive action, framing the attack as a response to Western aggression in Muslim-majority regions, portraying it as an act of self-defense for Islam. Now, there are a few similarities and differences compared to other instances of religious violence. Starting with similarities, like many attacks, this one involved radicalization through extremist propaganda. It also targeted a public space to maximize fear and disruption. A few differences are that this attack was carried out by a lone individual without significant operational support, unlike more coordinated attacks such as 9/11. Abedi's radicalization was also localized, influenced by family ties and personal grievances rather than direct involvement with a terrorist organization. And lastly, the choice of target being a concert primarily attended by young people, more focused on cultural and emotional impact rather than political or military. To prevent similar attacks in the future, we need to look in a few areas. First being increased monitoring. The government should be able to enhance the monitoring of extremist networks, particularly online. They can do this by leveraging technology. Developing algorithms to flag and address harmful content early will help us prevent such events. We can also increase funding for mental health services. By recognizing that mental health issues can make individuals more susceptible to extremist ideologies, we can also help prevent these events. And lastly, hardening public spaces. By implementing stronger security measures in soft target venues like concerts, malls, and schools, we are able to stop these events before they happen. Thank you guys, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.